What if I told you that a young woman with no law degree, no courtroom experience, and no official legal standing walked into a federal trial and shut down a seasoned congresswoman in front of the entire nation? Sounds impossible, right? But that's exactly what happened when Caroline Leavitt, former White House press secretary, faced off against Vanessa Crockett, a fierce Democratic lawmaker and ex-defense attorney, in one of the most explosive legal battles ever witnessed in an American courtroom. The case? A high-profile corruption trial involving over $5 million in stolen public funds. The twist? The courtroom didn't crumble under evidence. It shattered under the weight of legal precision, psychological warfare, and one woman's ability to weaponize the rules like a blade. This is not just a courtroom drama. It's a battle of minds, of power, of pride, and a reminder that titles mean nothing when genius walks into the room. Stay with us. What you're about to see will challenge everything you thought you knew about justice, politics, and who really holds the power. Because sometimes, the one you underestimate the most is the one who rewrites the game. The federal courtroom in Atlanta, Georgia, was already packed before sunrise. Reporters lined the benches, their eyes scanning for drama, their fingers twitching over keyboards. Outside, protesters chanted for justice while television crews angled their cameras at the steps. This wasn't just a trial, it was a national spectacle, and Vanessa Crockett knew it. She stood at the plaintiff's table, spine straight, eyes fierce beneath meticulously lined lashes. A former defense attorney turned congresswoman, Vanessa had made a career fighting for the underdog. Today, she was representing Michael Carter, a whistleblower who had risked everything to expose Richard Lawson, a powerful developer accused of siphoning millions from public infrastructure projects into his private empire. Vanessa didn't just have suspicions, she had proof. A USB drive, small and gleaming like a dagger, held a secret recording of Lawson's own voice admitting to embezzlement. Accompanying it, bank records, falsified invoices, and contracts doctored with chilling precision. This was her moment. When Judge Alan Carter entered the room and banged his gavel, silence fell like a curtain. Vanessa stepped forward, her heels striking the floor with the rhythm of resolve. "Your Honor," she began, her voice confident and commanding, "I represent a man who dared to speak the truth. Today we present irrefutable evidence that Richard Lawson diverted over $5 million of taxpayer funds for personal gain." She held up the USB drive. A glint of sunlight flashed across it like a divine seal. The room seemed to lean toward her. Then came the creak of a chair. From the defense table, a small figure rose. Caroline Leavitt. Vanessa's brows tightened. She'd been warned someone unexpected might show up, but nothing had prepared her for this. Caroline, former White House press secretary under President Trump, stood poised in a sharp black suit, her blonde hair gleaming under the overhead lights. She looked more like she was about to give a press conference than defend a criminal in court. "Objection, Your Honor," Caroline said calmly, her voice as smooth as glass sliding across steel. "Before we proceed, I move to challenge the validity of this so-called evidence." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. The press snapped to attention. Even Judge Carter blinked in mild surprise. Vanessa turned slowly, her tone dripping with disbelief. "I'm sorry, who exactly are you again? Trump's mouthpiece? This is a courtroom, not a campaign rally." Caroline tilted her head slightly. A smile, cold, elegant, touched her lips. "Miss Crockett," she replied, not blinking, "I may be a spokesperson, but I've spent enough time watching attorneys crash and burn to know when one is building their case on sand. That recording? Unless you have consent from both parties, it's inadmissible under Texas and federal law. Did you get Lawson's permission?" The room fell silent. Vanessa felt the first ripple of unease crawl up her spine. She hesitated. "The recording was obtained by my client during an emergency internal meeting. He had reason to believe Lawson posed a threat to public interest. Whistleblower protections apply." Caroline took a step forward. "You're confusing whistleblower protection with evidence admissibility. Under Federal Wiretap Act, Section 2511, two-party consent is required in Texas. If you don't have a court order or recorded permission, then what you have is nothing." Judge Carter cleared his throat. "Miss Leavitt raises a serious point. Do you have a court order authorizing this recording?" Vanessa's confidence wavered. She felt the eyes of the courtroom drilling into her back. "No, Your Honor," she admitted slowly, trying to recover her footing. "But the circumstances justified—" Caroline didn't wait. "And now we're relying on emotion instead of law," she interrupted. "How convenient." There was something chilling about the way she delivered her arguments. No theatrics, no raising of voice, just precision, like a scalpel, not a hammer. And suddenly Vanessa Crockett, former legal warrior, champion of justice, was on the defensive. Richard Lawson, who had been sitting like a bored statue, now leaned forward, his lips curling into a smug smile. His lead attorney, Edward Clean, whispered something behind his hand. The rest of the defense team began to nod, sensing the shift in power. Vanessa's fists clenched. "You're not even a lawyer," she hissed. "You don't belong at that table." Caroline didn't flinch. "I don't need a degree to read the law. I just need to know it better than you." The words struck like a slap. A wave of whispering surged across the courtroom. Reporters typed furiously. Cameras clicked. And at the center of it all stood Caroline Leavitt, cool, composed, and utterly in control. Judge Carter sighed and banged his gavel again. "Enough. We will proceed, but I expect decorum from both sides. Miss Crockett, submit your next piece of evidence." Vanessa turned to the stack of documents on the table. But for the first time in her life, they looked like paper shields in a war of blades. She realized what had just happened. She had entered the courtroom ready for a legal battle, but she had underestimated her enemy. Caroline Leavitt didn't come to play politics. She came to conquer, and she had just drawn first blood. "And you? Were you as shocked as Vanessa Crockett when Caroline Leavitt turned the tables in court? Do you think someone without a law degree should be allowed to act as a legal strategist in high-profile trials? If you were in Vanessa's shoes, how would you respond to Caroline's challenge? Have you ever underestimated someone based on their title, only to realize they were much more dangerous than expected? Let us know in the comments and stay tuned for next part, where the stakes only get higher. The moment the judge called a short recess, Vanessa Crockett all but bolted from the courtroom. She didn't leave out of fear, but out of necessity. She needed to breathe, to think, to remember who the hell she was. She stood in the hallway outside the federal courtroom in Atlanta, her fingers trembling slightly as they gripped the rim of a paper cup filled with lukewarm water. She didn't drink it. She couldn't. From inside, she could still hear the low murmurs of the crowd, the clicking of reporters' laptops, the flashes of phone cameras pointed not at her, but at Caroline Leavitt. That damn girl. Vanessa had faced war-hardened prosecutors, brilliant appellate attorneys, even judges who practically dripped bias, but never had she been thrown off balance by someone like Caroline. A woman with no law degree, no courtroom history, and no formal legal title had managed to spin the momentum of a major corruption case like it was a chess match, and Vanessa was the piece being sacrificed. And yet, there had been something else in that courtroom, something Vanessa hadn't felt in years. Fear, not for herself, but fear that this trial might slip through her fingers. That truth wouldn't be enough. "You all right?" came a quiet voice behind her. Vanessa turned. Rachel Harris, her trusted colleague and advisor, stood just a few steps back, a folder clutched tightly in her hands. "I've been better," Vanessa replied, voice tight. "She hit harder than I thought." "She's good," Rachel admitted, glancing toward the closed courtroom doors. "Too good. Knows the law like a scalpel, and she's not afraid to use it." Vanessa let out a small, bitter laugh. She quoted United States versus Nixon without blinking. "I haven't seen that pulled out since law school. She's not just some media pawn. She's something else." Rachel lowered her voice. "You think the White House trained her for this?" Vanessa didn't answer. She didn't have to. It was clear. Back in the courtroom, Richard Lawson sat like a man reborn. His legal team was energized, whispering strategies, already treating the trial like a celebration. Edward Clean, once skeptical of Caroline's place at the table, now leaned toward her with respect in his eyes. Caroline, meanwhile, sat with a quiet, calculated stillness. She didn't fidget. She didn't boast. Her confidence was unnerving precisely because it wasn't loud. It simply existed, unshaken, unbothered. When the recess ended and the court resumed, Vanessa returned with a face carved from stone. She would not, could not let herself unravel again. "Your Honor," she said, her tone sharper now, more focused. "We have here not just a recording, but hard financial documentation. Bank statements, signed contracts, paper trails that show money diverted from public infrastructure into Lawson's private shell companies." She laid the documents down with the weight of conviction, but Caroline was already standing. "Objection," she said smoothly. "Your Honor, I asked to review those documents, specifically the subpoena that obtained them." Judge Alan Carter motioned her forward. Caroline approached like a surgeon, holding a single piece of paper from her thin file. "This subpoena," she began, holding it up so the court clerk could take it, "was signed by a court clerk, not a federal judge. Under Rule 45 of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, only a judge can authorize subpoenas for sensitive financial data in criminal cases." Vanessa's breath caught. No, that couldn't be right. Caroline turned to her, voice soft but devastating. "The evidence remains relevant." Caroline's voice sliced through hers like a winter wind. "Procedure matters, Miss Crockett, especially in a courtroom where lives and reputations are on the line. If we allow shortcuts, what separates us from the lawless?" The press scribbled like mad. Photographers snapped as Vanessa clenched the edge of the table so hard her knuckles whitened. "You're twisting it," she said through her teeth. "This is about justice. Lawson stole from the people of Atlanta." Caroline didn't blink. "Then prove it. Legally." Judge Carter raised a hand, his face unreadable. "Enough," he said firmly. "Miss Leavitt makes a valid point. The court will review the subpoena's origin. Until then, the documents will not be entered into the record." Vanessa stared at the stack of paper. Once her weapons, now rendered useless by a technicality she had overlooked. She felt heat rush to her head, her skin tingling with the flush of anger and humiliation. "How can this be happening?" she whispered to Rachel as they sat down. "She's dismantling everything," Rachel murmured. "Piece by piece." Vanessa turned her head, her eyes locking on Caroline across the courtroom. She expected smugness, arrogance, but what she saw instead was worse. Poise, quiet triumph, not pride, but certainty. Caroline Leavitt was dismantling this case not with force, but with elegance. She was redefining the rules as she played them. And the terrifying part? It was working. By the time the judge called another recess, the courtroom was buzzing. Cameras pivoted. Reporters stood for better angles. One headline had already gone viral. "White House Press Secretary outsmarts Congresswoman in courtroom showdown." Vanessa walked out again, this time slower. Her movements deliberate, her jaw clenched. Her pulse roared in her ears. But this time, she didn't walk to escape. She walked to confront. Caroline was standing near the hallway window, scrolling through something on her phone, unfazed. Vanessa stopped a few steps away. "You're good," she said quietly. Caroline looked up, surprised by the sincerity. "I don't want to admit it," Vanessa added, "but you're damn good." Caroline pocketed her phone. "I'm not here for compliments, Miss Crockett. I'm here to win." Vanessa nodded slowly. "And I see that now. You're not just a mouthpiece. You're something else entirely." Caroline tilted her head, the faintest trace of a smirk tugging at her lips. "You're not the first to underestimate me. You won't be the last." Vanessa stepped closer, the fire slowly returning to her eyes. "I lost today, but not because I was wrong, because you were more prepared. Next time, I won't make the same mistake." Caroline's voice was almost a whisper. "I hope not." And with that, the two women stood in silence, rivals not just in ideology, but in intellect. Respect had been earned, but war was far from over. If you were standing in Vanessa's shoes, face to face with the woman who just dismantled your case, what would you do next? Fight harder, walk away, or something entirely different? And right now, the federal courtroom in Atlanta had never felt so silent. The air was tight, heavy with the scent of tension and disbelief. Every eye was fixed on the bench, where Judge Alan Carter sat reviewing the subpoena Caroline Leavitt had just challenged. His brows were furrowed, the paper trembling slightly between his fingers. Not from his hands, but from the storm he could feel brewing. At the prosecution table, Vanessa Crockett sat frozen. Her fingers were curled into fists against her thighs, and her eyes narrowed on the judge, her lips pressed into a pale line. This wasn't just a legal battle anymore. It had become a war for legitimacy, and she could feel herself slipping into the role of the one being judged. Next to her, Rachel Harris didn't speak. She didn't have to. The truth was sitting in front of them in bold letters. The subpoena was flawed. No judge's signature, just a court clerk's. "Miss Crockett," Judge Carter said slowly, his voice like gravel, "this subpoena does not meet the legal standards required for the admittance of financial records in federal court. Miss Leavitt's objection stands." It was official. The documents were out. A quiet gasp rippled through the room. Then the whispering started, first from the press section, then from Lawson's legal team, and finally from the spectators who'd come looking for justice and had found theater instead. Vanessa's breath caught in her throat. Her body didn't move, but her mind screamed. The recording, gone. The documents, excluded. The carefully constructed case she'd spent months building had just collapsed in seconds, all under the scalpel of a young woman who, by every measure, should have been an outsider. Caroline Leavitt didn't cheer. She didn't smile. She simply stood there, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. "I can't believe this," Vanessa muttered. "She didn't win because she had better evidence," Rachel whispered beside her. "She won because she played the rules better." But Vanessa wasn't ready to surrender. Not yet. She stood, addressing the court one last time. "Your Honor, the evidence may be disqualified by technicality, but the facts remain. Richard Lawson embezzled $5 million in taxpayer money. Are we really going to let a loophole bury the truth?" Before the judge could respond, Caroline stepped forward, her voice even and unshaken. "With all due respect, Your Honor, this isn't about burying the truth. It's about upholding the law. Miss Crockett's failure to follow procedure undermines the very justice she claims to serve. If we accept her evidence today, what precedent does that set for tomorrow?" The room fell still again. Judge Carter took a breath, his gaze swinging between the two women. "I will postpone further proceedings until both sides submit new, properly obtained evidence. Until then, the motion to exclude the documents is granted." He banged the gavel once. "Court is adjourned." The bang echoed like a gunshot, and just like that, it was over. Caroline returned to her seat, gathering her papers with machine-like efficiency. Vanessa stood there stunned, watching the courtroom begin to unravel around her. Richard Lawson stood and reached across the defense table to shake Caroline's hand. "You saved me today," he said under his breath. "Trump made the right call." Caroline looked at him, her eyes cool. "I didn't save you. The law did. I just knew where to look." Reporters rushed forward, shouting questions, raising microphones, snapping photos. Caroline pushed through them like water through reeds, untouched, unshaken, victorious. Outside, the headlines hit the airwaves within minutes. White House press. Secretary shocks legal world with courtroom victory. Caroline Leavitt outmaneuvers Congresswoman in historic trial twist. Back in her office that evening, Vanessa sat slumped in her chair, a cold coffee untouched on her desk. The sunlight had disappeared. All that remained were the shadows creeping along the walls. "I underestimated her," she said aloud. Rachel stood nearby, silent for a moment before responding. "She's not a lawyer, Vanessa, and she made you look like a first year." Vanessa looked up sharply. "I don't say that to hurt you," Rachel added quickly. "I say it because that's the truth. But it's also a warning. People like her, they're the new breed. They don't play by the old rules. They master the law from the outside and use it like a sword. You can't outshout them. You have to outthink them." Vanessa leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. "She's a monster." Rachel gave a small smile. "She's a genius." Later that week, Caroline appeared at a White House press briefing, surrounded by a swarm of cameras and journalists. "How does it feel to beat a congresswoman in court?" one asked. Caroline smiled faintly. "I wasn't trying to beat anyone," she said calmly. "I was trying to defend the Constitution. The courtroom isn't about who's louder. It's about who's right under the law." And with that, she left the stage, leaving behind not just a trial, but a legacy already being whispered through legal circles. Back in Atlanta, Vanessa Crockett stood in front of a mirror, adjusting her blazer before returning to Congress. She was bruised, yes, but not broken. The fire in her eyes had returned. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "Next time, I'll be ready." Because Caroline Leavitt may have won this battle, but Vanessa Crockett wasn't walking away. She was walking back into the arena, and this time, she knew exactly who she was up against. Audience questions. What did you think of this dramatic legal showdown? Was it a fair victory, or did it feel like justice was denied? If you enjoyed this story, comment 3 below. If you thought it was just okay, comment 2. And if it didn't live up to your expectations, go ahead and comment 1. Also, we'd love to know, what country are you watching from? And don't forget, share this video with someone who loves courtroom drama, political rivalries, or unexpected underdogs rising to the top. We'll see you in the next story. Because in a world like this, truth is only the beginning.